Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Riana Milne. We will be discussing childhood trauma. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Riana, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Bruce. It's great to be here.
It is my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. Wow, where do I begin? Okay, I'm Coach Riana Milne. I have been a psychotherapist in private practice for over 24 years. That company is called Therapy by the Sea. And today I am a global life and love trauma recovery coach. I help both singles and couples around the world heal from both childhood and love relationship trauma under that company called Lessons in Life and Love Coaching, LLC. I'm a #1 best-selling author of 13 books, but the two I use for my course is called Love Beyond Your Dreams, Break Free of Toxic Relationships to Have the Love You Deserve, and Live Beyond Your Dreams, From Fear and Doubt to Personal Power, Purpose, and Success. I have a podcast called Lessons in Life and Love with Coach Riana Milne. Been featured in Forbes magazine, New York Weekly, Disrupt, Fashion Republic, Business Success, and a few others because I didn't have this all written down. But that's a little bit about me.
And I think you've said this a couple times before.
What's that?
It sounded very. You sound very comfortable. That's all.
Oh, well, yeah, I get interviewed a lot. So people want to understand what childhood trauma is, love trauma, and so forth. Yeah. So,
Well, childhood trauma is our topic. So first, define for me what a child is.
well, the child is pre-birth all the way through to age 26. And childhood trauma are experiences that they go through. And there is big T trauma and little t trauma. So, big T trauma is something what most people think trauma is, like having a car accident while you're young and maybe losing a leg. That's big T trauma, or experiencing a rape or molestation. Little t trauma is something more ongoing, like living in a household where there's an alcoholic parent, or growing up in poverty, or being bullied at school for several years, or feeling like you're not fitting in. I actually, in 2012, created the childhood trauma checklist where it's the top 10 traumas. And then when I assess my clients coming into me, I also rate the severity level of those 10 traumas. And then we see what's going on in their adults' life, in life, love, and business. And I correlate how these two are related. And then we go from there.
I wrote a speech some time ago for a woman who wanted to talk about the traumas she had experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And the first trauma she spoke about was childbirth. And the second, which shocked me, was rape.
Okay.
I would have reversed the order, but it was her speech. She contacted me and said, I got to take childbirth out. And I laughed because I had told her that I didn't think that it didn't sound right. And I asked her why. And she said that when she read the speech to her sister was offended and said that that childbirth was the most wonderful experience she had ever had. So
yeah, that's different for everybody.
It's
You know,
different
there
for
can be
everybody.
some very traumatic things happening during childbirth as well. You
Of
know,
course,
so
of course.
yeah.
But she was just talking about I asked her, I said, I don't mean to be personal, but are you just talking about pain? She said, yeah. So I said, okay.
Mhm.
So, and her sister, of course, knew. So,
But there's two types of pain. There's emotional pain and physical pain.
no, we were talking about physical pain.
Hmm.
Physical pain. It was just
Yeah.
she made a joke and she said, Bruce, you do not want to be with me when I'm in the dentist chair. Pain. If people have a different reaction to pain, to trauma,
Hmm.
how do you know if they're making a mountain out of a molehill? And how do you prevent them from making a mole out of a mountain, if that makes sense?
Well, once you know what the top 10 traumas are, and then we know what the severity levels are. People who are stuck in fear-based negative mindsets. Every client I have comes to me with high anxiety, bouts of depression, rumination of what they could do differently. They're usually high strung, unhappy, lonely, struggle in love relationships. That is one of the biggest outcomes of unhealed childhood trauma. Struggle in business success. They may want that, but they stay stuck in a job that they hate for 20 years because they're afraid to leave or try something new. So it's this feeling of stuck in this negative mindset. So there's a lot of emotions behind it, and it all comes from the childhood dynamics of how it was when things were when they grew up. I mean, if you'd like, I'll go on what the top 10 traumas are that would explain
Please,
things a lot more.
go ahead.
Okay, so before we go into that, just know that the research shows childhood trauma goes through at least 3 generations. So if you have something you recognize here, your parents had it as long as so as your grandparents. And as I talk about the top 10 traumas, this is not about blame or shame, because in 2021, the research shows 100% of us have some of these childhood traumas. So it's just discovering what yours are. And we can't change what we don't know or understand. So here's the top 10 that I came up with from years of experience of being a licensed mental health counselor and a drug and alcohol addictions counselor. And my experience comes from being a trauma counselor within schools, grades kindergarten all the way through college, being a school psychologist at high school level, working in a children's mental health ward for ages 5 through 19 in South Jersey, working in addiction centers, one for teenagers, one for women from the prison system. So with all my, and also having a private practice. So with all this type of experience coming together, this is what I devised my childhood trauma checklist on in 2012. So the first one is, did you grow up with addiction in the family? And a lot of people think, okay, drugs or alcohol, but there's a lot of other addictions. We're talking sex addiction. That means knowing your parent was a chronic cheater, porn use, gambling, hoarding, eating, spending, workaholism, gaming addiction, being on your computers or phones all the time, which is social media addiction. Those are just a few that we look at. Number two is verbal messaging. Were you told I love you? Did you get compliments? Did you hear like you'll never amount to anything or change your outfit, you look fat in that? Verbal messaging is very important about how you feel about yourself and self-love. Number three is emotional abuse or neglect. Number four is any physical abuse or beatings, rape or molestation. Number five is around abandonment, and there's fault and no fault. So a no fault abandonment would be if a parent happens to die early, they happen to be deployed for war and they're away, and I happen to be in an elementary school during the Iraq and Afghanistan war, and children just kind of blank out. And all of a sudden they're called ADHD because they can't focus. No, they're in traumatic situations where they're worried about is mom or dad going to come home alive. So this is where trauma interrupts the cognitive learning patterns for children. And then no fault could also be a parent travels for work, but that's how they support their family, but they're not home much. And then another type of abandonment is fault abandonment, never being in your child's life, being in the child's life while the couple is together. If they break up, you barely see your children, or even if the parent is in the home and emotionally they are not connected. They don't get involved with the kids, they don't go to the school events, they're just kind of there to work and eat and leave. Okay, the next one is being adopted, part of the foster care system, or living with adults that are not your parents because your parents couldn't keep you for some reason. Trauma 7 is one that most people can relate to. It's around feeling not good enough. You didn't fit in, you felt different. You could have been a chubby, overweight child or skinny and gawky and called a nerd. You could have been the only African American student in an all Caucasian school or from a different culture, or coming out as LGBTQ and your family and friends did not accept you. So there's all kinds of reasoning in trauma number 7. Trauma 8 is around the sibling. Your sibling could have been born with a medical issue, and therefore you got very little of mom's and dad's time. They could have bullied you, or most often you perceived that sibling to be the golden child, the favored one. So the star athlete, the more handsome or beautiful, or the better student, and you felt like you couldn't measure up. Trauma 9 is 2 traumas. I had to bring down trauma 11. There are more than 10. But now one of the biggest traumas is community trauma. If you're involved, your community is involved with war or Mother Nature events or floods, fires, hurricanes, or mass shootings or school shootings. These are all community traumas. Then there is family trauma connected to that. So certainly if your family went through those community traumas, now you have family trauma. That also includes if a parent was incarcerated or you grew up in a dangerous area where you always felt afraid. You had to move every 2 to 4 years, like in the US, our military families are moving. That makes you the new kid in school all the time. Growing up with a lot of lack messages. We don't have money to pay the gas bill this month, or we don't have money for food. So there's a lot around family trauma. That's just a few examples. And then trauma 10 is mental health issues in mom or dad. The two most common that kids have to navigate around that are very difficult for the kids is one is bipolar. That's manic depressive. So depression can show up as anger, acting out, or extreme fatigue, and kind of just separating yourself from the family. And a manic phase, a lot of people think that's the high and happy one. Well, it could be for a period of time, like a spending spree, and then it crashes to a depression when you can't pay your bills the next month. And then borderline personality, I think, is the most dangerous one for kids to navigate. It's real erratic moods. When they're good, they're great. When they're horrid, it's really hard to deal with it. And erratic moods. And this is when somebody would yell at the kids for no reason at all. And the child is always living like on walking on eggshells. So those are the top 10 childhood traumas that I described from my research.
Riana, that is a very impressive list.
So can you relate to a couple of those, Bruce?
Well, everybody can. You said it yourself. You
Yes.
reminded me of when I took Psychology 101.
This
The
was not
teacher,
discussed in a triple masters of psychology. We did not hear the term childhood trauma,
well, no,
believe it or
we
not.
didn't discuss that either.
Yeah.
This was 74, 75, something like that.
Uh-huh.
The teacher said, we are going to be discussing every one of your relatives. So just sit back, and he discussed every one of our relatives. But anyways,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you said something that brought back a nice memory.
Okay.
First you said that the definition of child begins before they are born.
Yes, because if the
And
child is in an anxious mother,
yeah, no,
then that baby is usually born with a heightened anxiety and, reflex
I now
uh,
understand that.
situation.
And
Yes,
the other thing is that you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know what you don't know, then you can't get the care that you need. So what am I doing?
exactly.
For 3 years, for all intents and purposes, I ran a small children's mental health center in Jerusalem. It was for children with interpersonal communication problems.
Ah, mm-hmm.
And one of my responsibilities was typing up the reports of the therapists. And my boss would dictate to me because it was easier for me.
Okay.
So she's explaining that finally the mother admitted what her problem was with the child, because the child was what we called the identified patient. And the
Hmm.
problem in this case was with the mother.
Sure.
And for the first 6 months of the child's life, the mother literally could not bring herself to touch the child.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
I said, hang on. So what? The child won't remember what happened during the first 6 months of their life. How does she? What gives? Then I got a lecture, the lecture that you're going to give right now, because I think that that is one of the things that I learned on that job that was most important to me. That
Hmm.
what happens to an infant stays with them probably for the extent of their life, even if they don't know what it's coming from, because they can't possibly know. They're only remembering
Right.
the emotion. They're not remembering the cause.
Yeah.
Go
So, I
for it.
mean, childhood trauma is inside the brain and the body. According to Bowlby's theory of attachment, the first 3 years are super important. To me, I say from birth to age 11, basically personality and the outlook in the world is formed. So, knowing what the childhood traumas are, being a parent, and I work with a lot of parents, I say we need to teach your children the mindset for success. And that's what I teach my clients to overcome their original childhood trauma. There's a lot of trauma recovery skills. I am what's called a CCTP, certified clinical trauma professional. So there's a lot of skills, and I work with my people 4 to 6 months to overcome these subconscious or unconscious traumas that are keeping them stuck. And they may not remember them, but they know that they have low trust. They know they can't attach to people. They know they want love desperately, and then they get it, then they sabotage it. So where are those patterns coming from? Yeah, this is all attachment issues. So
I
we have to
had
look at a lot of the different patterns of what's going on as an adult so we can trace it back to the childhood experiences.
I had friends. They had their first child. There were a few of us over there, and the baby was crying when her mother would hold her.
Hmm.
And one person said to her, well, maybe the baby just doesn't like you. And
Yikes.
yeah, exactly. It cringed, and everybody just cringed. And you can say that about the third or fourth or fifth child, but not the first child. And
Yeah,
even
I
that,
shouldn't say it at all,
no,
but
but definitely not the first child.
yeah.
Now, I had it happen to me. Friends invited me over, and I'm holding the baby, and the baby stops crying. I hand her to her mother. Baby starts crying, hands her back to me. Father comes home and says, what's going on? And I told him, but I knew what the problem was.
Is a
And
highly anxious mother or
no,
depressed mother?
no, no, no.
Hmm.
It was very simple. And I said, now, the reason your daughter doesn't cry when I hold her is probably because she can already sense my animal magnetism. She can see how handsome I am and how charming I am, and knows how intelligent I am. Or it could be that like me, she cannot stand your wife's perfume. So maybe if mommy goes and takes a
Oh, the
shower,
perfume. Yeah, smells. Hmm.
so she looked at me, had a few choice words, and her husband said to me, if she comes out without perfume and that baby cries, you're a dead man. She came out without perfume, baby was happy as a lark.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's
So,
all kinds of things, that are part of it.
but the mother was making a big deal out of it. It was traumatic for her. As soon as we discovered the reason, it was just laughed off. And she just told everybody who came over, no perfume, no cologne, no scented aftershave. And problem
Okay.
solved. All right.
Hmm.
But it's not always that simple. I know that from the from my time at the I almost said career counseling center, that the
Okay.
child center.
Uh-huh. Well, also, once the pattern starts, the mother's already anxious, and the expectation is the baby's going to cry. Watch, I'm
Yeah.
going to hold her, she's going to cry. So that expectation, the anxiety is already up,
Mhm.
which babies feel. So,
Which comes from body language
hmm,
that babies sense even before they are able to understand verbal communication.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, how can someone, because there are so many things that we cannot control in our body language, how can you be cognizant of your of your body language when dealing with an infant or with a child who is not yet able to understand verbal cues or to express themselves verbally?
Well, really, the mother, if she's struggling with post traumatic, birth or depression, she needs to go get help, so that there could be a better bonding experience. I don't really work with the baby birth situation.
Okay.
I'm more involved with those age 5, kindergarten age, all the way up to 80 is my oldest client. So the whole baby attachment part, that's already
My
in
apologies.
the
I
5 year
misunderstood.
old who is struggling, the 5 year old bully. Why is he struggling?
Okay.
Well, because he has the angry father at home, so I have to work with
Okay.
the parents. So
That's different.
it's more that work that I
Okay.
do.
I
Yeah.
misunderstood. Like I said, you brought back good memories. I enjoyed working there. My boss was great, and I learned a lot from her. So
Okay.
let's move on. We have an adult who suffered a trauma at a very young age, doesn't remember it, is not going to remember it in this scenario. All right. When I've had this discussion with others, they say, well, with hypnosis, you can bring it out. Fine. That's great. But let's say you can't bring it out. You are not going to know what the cause is, but you will know what the effect is and what the outcome is. And that is what you have to deal with in order
Right.
to help them, correct?
Yes. They don't
How?
really have to relive the whole trauma.
No, no.
We have to work with what's going on in their life right now.
In
So,
addition to what is going on, well, what is going on in their life right now is their problem, the situation that needs to be dealt with, but
hmm,
also the fact you mentioned community, that we all have friends who want to be helpful and who give contradictory advice and maybe peer pressure one way or another. How can a person who's trying to deal with a childhood trauma and may not yet be fully developed, meaning that they are less than 21 and their brain is not fully developed,
hmm,
how can they cope with peer pressure?
they come to a coach like me because they have to get empowered with communication. They have to tap into what talents they do have. They have to raise their own self-esteem and not be bullied. There's a way to do that. Like I said, I worked with kids that were bullied all through every grade of school. So there's a lot of different techniques that we use. We sit down with the bully and the victim and say, what is the issue? And my students learn that usually the bully is coming from a home of childhood trauma. So I actually developed a program called Stand Up for Friendship that was televised in South Jersey about having a bully busting buddy. So the kids could pair off. If someone was being teased or bullied, their buddy would stand up for them and say, is everything okay? Should we go down to Miss Rihanna's office and talk it through? So there's all kinds of techniques you can use to teach children to be more empowered and the communication skills they need to work through issues. So even when like a fourth grader can understand negotiate your differences, I also help adults learn to do that as well with different communication skills that they have not learned, not at home, not in school, not in business. So there's different communication skills that they have to know, as well as understanding each partner's original childhood trauma and their triggers or emotionally triggers that push the buttons, so that when something comes up, they're not pushing the buttons, but instead communicating with kindness and yet empowerment to get their points met.
In an employment environment, there are
Hmm.
sometimes bullies,
Yes. Those are bosses who have childhood trauma that's not healed.
but they can
True.
also be a peer, a colleague, not
Yes,
a
it can. A coworker. Yes.
coworker.
Hmm.
Is there anything in the work environment for coping with this, given all of the legal not niceties that exist today in the workplace?
Yes, I actually give a lot of speeches in corporations, and we empower the HR department to understand both childhood, love trauma, workplace bullying, and really it's getting the two parties to sit down and work through whatever is going on. Also giving the bully, a one last chance opportunity to, treat their coworker with kindness. A lot of times it's something they might be handling at home, a sick wife, money issues, something else not related to work, but they're coming in a bad mood and taking it out on other people. So we have to get to the base of what's going on for the one that's doing the bullying and open up the lines of communication with the person that they're picking on. But it
I
is important for them to know that.
I had that at work once, and I
Hmm.
went over to a couple of colleagues and I said, we'll call him Joe. That's not his real name,
Okay,
obviously. I
sure.
said, Joe, how's Joe treating you? He goes, yeah, I don't know what happened to him. This, that, and the other thing. Same thing with me. I said, let's go talk to him.
Hmm.
Let's not make a big deal out of this. So we go into his office, we close the door, say, we're going to talk to you. You don't like it? Too bad.
Hmm.
We've considered you to be a friend. What in God's name is going on with you? You've totally
Yeah,
changed. Tell us what the problem is. Just give it to us straight. Maybe we can help you.
exactly.
And he slumped in his chair, was on the verge of tears, and he told us what the problem was.
Hmm.
We said, okay, we can deal with this. This is what we're going to do. Let's create a plan where we can take a little bit of your work away. Nobody needs to know it. It stays between the four of us. You'll get full credit for the work that we do. And that's it. Problem solved. Didn't make a big deal out of it. Didn't go running to HR. We took care of it amongst ourselves.
And you can do it that way. And then you also go into, but what cannot happen is you yelling and screaming at people, or you bully so and so, or demand that they bring you coffee when you can get your own coffee. So you go through the things that they're also doing that will not be tolerated in the workplace. That would be part
Well,
two of that situation.
there
Yeah.
was no part two. We solved the
Oh,
problem. And
okay.
um, he was under a lot of stress at home,
Yeah.
and
They're
that
definitely
impacted.
related.
And then
Relationship and work success are
and
definitely
then
related.
and then he said that adding to it was the stress of having to complete whatever projects he was working on. So
Mhm.
since we could take some of the workload off of him, that enabled him to deal with his family issues. And the boss came over to me and said, what's with Joe? I said, is there a problem? He said, there was, but there isn't anymore. And I said, so why are you bothering me? Go away. And he just smiled and he walked away. He knew that we had solved the problem. He didn't know
Yeah.
if I had solved it or if somebody else had solved it, but the problem was solved. And if it hadn't been solved, he knew that I would have told him that we got something to deal with and we got to bring in a professional, but there was no need. We are regrettably almost out of time. And before I let you go, I have one final question to ask you. But
Sure.
if the computer will behave itself, and now it is, I will share your contact information, make us magically appear. And my
There you
final
go.
question is this. Is there anything I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
I think it's interesting for the people to understand what is the relationship between childhood trauma and love relationship trauma and work trauma. And they can get a lot more of that information at my website. There is a free ebook at the top, How to Have the Love You Deserve. And my website is rianamilne.com. And I just want to encourage all the listeners that you definitely can create the life you desire and have the love you deserve. But if you recognize there is 4 free love tests on there too, take the childhood trauma checklist so you can see which ones you have. And certainly reach out to me if you want to meet with me and go deeper into this for yourself. So, yeah, you have to really understand what the traumas are, which ones you have, the severity level, and then how they're showing up for you in life, love, and business today as an adult. Then we heal them and move you on your way, move yourself forward.
Riana, thank you so much. You provided important information, truly important information for our viewers, and I thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching, and as always, please stay focused on success.